Okay, we're back here. I Run Far live from the Coffee Bar, Thursday before Western States 2018. We're joined by none other than Timothy Freriks from Flagstaff, Arizona. Tim, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
It's strange, you know, for me as kind of like an observer of the sport. You're sort of flying under the radar coming into the race. It kind of boggles my mind. I think in a race that has, you know, the likes of your friend Jim Walmsley and Francois Dane, who's one of the greatest of all time, it lends to other people being able to fly under the radar. Of course, you had one of the most incredible seasons last year, winning both Transwilcania and the North Face 50-mile championship at the end of the year, two world-class events with international fields. How did your kind of meteoric rise in the sport, and especially your success in 2017, how does that helped you come into this race, and does it give you confidence going into the race?
Yeah, I think it does. So I've seen success at 50 miles, and I really like that distance, and I think that distance is a good distance to just acquaint you with ultra running in general, but it's definitely not 100 miles. 100 miles is a different beast, I think. You know, talking with Jim and talking with Jared and guys that have done it before. But yeah, it definitely gives me confidence. I know I've been able to do it over the shorter distances. I think just going into this with a kind of a little bit of a cautious approach, but kind of ready to get after it, knowing that I've put in the training, does give me confidence for race day. But yeah, there is an element of first time going in. But I think other guys have had success their first time, and ready to kind of get after it and give it my best shot.
Let's talk about that concept of stepping up to the 100-mile distance for a minute, because there are people watching right now in this room and online who are on the cusp of their own first 100-mile race. It's like you're doubling distance.
For sure. Yeah.
What's that like? Yeah, what is that process like in your head of trying to wrap your head around it?
I think what kind of gives me peace of mind is just looking at the little things, making sure my crews are dialed, and taking care of things from a nutrition standpoint. But yeah, and doubling the distance of what I've been competitive in is intimidating, but at the same time, I'm somebody that I like a new challenge, and
no longer. There we go.
But yeah, I like a new challenge, and I think going into it with that mindset of I'm gonna challenge myself, I'm gonna push myself with something new and something longer, has me really excited, to be honest.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I honestly think the whole first 100-mile thing is a little bit overrated too, so I don't think you need to worry too much. But I saw you this spring at Lake Sonoma 50. You were there supporting your friends, and of course everybody in your little training group got into the race, which was incredible to watch. But you were hurt at that point. Right. Can you tell us what you were dealing with and how your recovery's been, how your training's been since then?
Yeah, I think if I can trace it back to one thing, I fell in the Grand Canyon on a training run by myself. Yeah, kind of on a more remote route, and ended up having to hike out, kind of hobble out. And from that point forward, I ended up favoring my other leg and started having some IT band issues in my left leg. And so that just, it's nothing a lot of people get stress fractures and bone issues, but for me, it's always been ligaments and tendons that have bothered me. And I think just, for whatever reason, it was just knee pain, IT band, kind of classic runner's knee IT band syndrome. And probably kept jogging on it a little more than I should have. I kept trying to test the waters, and I think that kind of probably prolonged things. But I don't know, right after I saw you guys at Lake Sonoma, things started clicking again. I had a lot of great people in my corner in Flagstaff to work with me. Wes Gregg at Hypo 2 really got me healthy, I think, and Tommy Pusey was working on me a bunch too. So between those guys, really was able to start clicking again after Lake Sonoma. So it's been a short block. block, but I kind of like to go into things a little undertrained, rather than the other direction. In college, I dabbled in the overtraining category a lot, so I think staying away from that is to my advantage.
It's probably hard to do when you're training with the group of guys that you are.
Yeah, it is.
A few people in Flagstaff have told me that you are arriving to appropriate fitness at just the right time.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, is that... Talk about what's happened since you were able to start running, and where do you think you are?
If I look back at my training logs, like I've seen, I don't know, like before Black Canyon, the race that got me into Western States, I was probably in the shape of my life like in January, and I'm thinking back like, man,
it's true. Like after TNF, I'm always so fit.
Yeah, it was just
50. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
It was like, man, December, January went really well, and I remember really nailing the run in the Grand Canyon in January and just being like, I've got a long way to go until Black Canyon in the middle of February. So I do think I've had kind of, if you look at everything, like an 8-week block here, and that's worked well for me in the past. I would prefer like a couple more weeks, but I've been really fit off like a 2-month block in the past, and I think I'm kind of getting into shape like right at the right time. And it's kind of hard to say too, because we've done so much heat training, and it's like when you're running in the heat in the Grand Canyon for your big days, it's like you kind of just feel like garbage no matter what.
And so it's like,
and so it's like kind of been that I've kind of had to keep a level head with that, just knowing that like it's not going to be the same when you're running in 105 degrees in the Grand Canyon. But I think things are rounding into shape at the right time.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, as I sort of said, you're sort of flying under the radar, but astute observers like myself think you have probably a legitimate chance to win the race, even though it's your first 100-miler. But based on your performances in the past, you're also going to be racing against a lot of world-class guys. Obviously, your good friend Jim Walmsley, who has had sort of transcended the sport in the last couple of years, Francois Dane, who's one of the best in the world. They both sort of like to put pressure on the field early in the race.
For sure.
It seems you also like to race fairly aggressively. How do you think about your strategy leading into the race? Do you think you might go with the front pack, or are you going to try and be conservative, being that it's your first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say for sure. Like I always have like a rough game plan, and then like I try and roll with the punches on race day. I think a lot of guys go into it with that mentality, but I do think for this race, like I'm going to err on the side of caution. Yeah, I mean, just erring on the side of caution, but I still do want to put myself out there.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever really want to go into a race like just having myself beat already before lining up. So I think giving myself a shot while being cautious is kind of going to try and be my approach. You're not going to see me leading the race in the first like 10-20 miles. There's just no way. There's no way. I do like to be aggressive, but not. I mean, I think this place, you have to respect 100 miles. You have to respect the course and the heat, and being cautious, I think, plays to everyone's favor.
So does that mean you're going to want to like know the guys in the front are a couple minutes ahead? Do you want to keep sight of them? Are you going to be running by feel?
I think a lot of it for me is going to be running on feel.
Okay.
I think comparing yourself to the field is always like a useful tool. You know, I know the guys that are running, and I know a lot of them are in really good shape right now. I mean, I train with Jim every week, so I know where those guys are coming from, and so like I think I will use those guys as a bit of a gauge. But at the same time, for me, so much of ultra running is just like monitoring yourself and kind of paying attention to your internal cues. And I think, though I haven't raced one yet, I think that's even more important at 100 miles where the distance is so long. So mostly internal stuff.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Let's talk for a second about at heat. I think that's one of the big factors that is going to influence how this race plays out. You've experienced some pretty incredible heat in the canyon, pretty much like what you're going to see in the canyons of Western States. How's heat going? How are you in heat?
I think I'm like average. I'm not. Cody Reed will joke about Jim Walmsley. Like, Jim is a camel. He's had some of his best, like, just objective, like, splits in the canyon. Like, he's run some of his best times when it's like 100 degrees out.
Is that right?
He grew up in Phoenix.
Yeah,
it's not like, fair.
Yeah,
it's not fair. He's made for this race.
Different body thermometer.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, even guys like Jim are prone to, overheating. So I think, I think I'm pretty, I call myself average, but I do think, like, I grew up in the desert, not as hot as where Jim grew up, but, it'd be 110 in the summers. And so I do have experience in the heat, and training in the heat. This block honestly has gone, I've had better runs in the heat than I ever have had for myself. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's just another layer of, like, well, let's just put our heads down and, like, get through it. So yeah.
Cool. And I mean, we've already touched a bit about, like, the community you guys have in Flagstaff and your whole Coconino Cowboy thing. Maybe just, like, tell us a little bit about your guys' group and how you think it helps all you guys. And how often do you guys train together? Anything specific you can share in that context?
Yeah, I think more than anything, like, we're just a group of friends that like to train together. Is kind of the bottom line. And that has been, I mean, it's been super useful when it was like just Jim and I and then Cody. It's just been useful to have like Jim was a year into it when I came in, and or maybe a little more, and just having guys around you to bounce ideas off of, and we're all self-coached, and so I think just having that as kind of like a gauge of, like, oh, Cody ran, he went out and won way too cool, or Jim went out and won Lake Sonoma, like, what were those guys doing when they did that? And, like, so I think it's just a useful tool to be able to kind of compare, but it's also like we've been able to hold each other accountable. Like, I know when I get really deep in the trenches of, like, working a lot and running by myself a lot, it's a lot easier to, like, let training kind of slide, and, like, so just being held accountable by my friends and having people to join up for a run at, like, Eric Sensman's run with me at like 9 p.m. before after a 13 hour shift, and so it's just like stuff like that.
That's great.
It's just
it's super valuable.
Yeah. It's been awesome.
You mentioned both Jim and Cody, and obviously Jim and Jared are both sort of known as being high volume trainers. I talked to Cody last night, and we were talking about how he's more of a low volume guy. How is it? Do you feel pressure when you're training with guys who are doing 150, 170 mile weeks?
Yeah.
And I mean, does that influence your training at all?
Absolutely. I think, like, it's when you're training with guys that put in that much volume, you kind of question your own methods. You're like, man, maybe I'm not doing enough. But I kind of like where I'm at with, like, my work-life balance, and just being kind of self-limited with work has kept me from overtraining. In college, I mean, I would routinely do bigger miles, not the kind of miles they're doing now, but back-to-back weeks for months at a time, and ended up just kind of overtrained. And so I think just paying attention to what works for me, and in being, like, kind of that moderate, not necessarily low volume or high volume, but like 100, 110 miles a week has worked really well for me. But yeah, there is a pressure there. Like, man, am I not doing enough? But I think finding a balance has worked well.
That's smart. Yeah.
I've always wondered in that group, like, the accountability thing. Does the accountability ever go in the opposite direction? Like, maybe you better ease off a little bit there?
It does. No, it does. I mean, and yeah, at least for me, it's like, I'll, like, give the guys my schedule or whatever, and we're talking about things, and I'll kind of ease off of things. But yeah, it should probably work that way a little more than it does.
Let's go have a Dairy Queen instead of a second run, maybe?
Yeah. They're like, this lazy guy's only doing 110 this week? Come on.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to come see us this morning. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of interested people watching your race on Saturday, and a lot of people rooting for you. And yeah, good luck.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Let's give Mr. Freriks a round of applause.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps our I Run Fun Live at Western State's Thursday morning show. We'll be back here at 4 p.m. this afternoon with 5 more interviews. Make sure to have have a drink and give your patronage to the coffee bar here. We've also got the iRunFar store back there, irunfar.com/store if you'd like to shop online. Thank you so much to DryMax, Buff, Jaybird, and of course the coffee bar for hosting us. We'll see you guys at 4 p.m. There's going to be beer.